even be the best linebacker on Penn State.
Joe Pa's talking about assignment football, but he admits that Arrington is a great athlete. I think he's the most exciting player in the country. Consider the way he was used 2 weeks ago against Arizona. 5 different locations on the first 5 plays, 5 different defensive structures, usually with Arrington getting up from the bottom of the pile. When he asked for a little bit too much freedom, the head coach says if Arrington's going to be a revolutionary, he's going to be a revolutionary in exile.
Chris, a series that is winding down. The last time they'll play in Beaver Stadium, they do play in Pittsburgh next year, and there are no planned further meetings between Pitt and Penn State. Let's send it back to you in the studio.
And welcome back if you're watching on ESPN. Welcome if you're watching on the Deuce. You should have been with us an hour ago or on the other network. Guys, quick thoughts on Pitt, Penn State?
Well, I think Pitt comes into this football game with an inexperienced quarterback. It will hurt them against a talented Lions defense. And on offense, I think the Lions will really open it up. Already 16 different players have scored touchdowns. Today, they'll just continue to show that depth, win big.
Boy, I like that Michigan's quarterback, Tom Brady. I don't see why they even take him out of the game for one play. Michigan wins big by 40 over Rice.
Some other games to keep your eye on today. We haven't talked about this, but Houston visits Alabama. The Tide kind of struggled with Vanderbilt. Houston blew out Rice. The Love coach, Kim Helton, he's got a pretty decent team. It's a very important game for Alabama's season and for Mike DuBose. And keep an eye on Morgantown, West Virginia. The Mountaineers have never started 0-2 under Don Nehlen. But here comes Travis Prentice. Miami University out of the MAC. It's been a success story so far this season. If they can get that win, Lee, sets up a potential Marshall-Miami battle of unbeatens in October.
We should be there, right?
Yeah,
okay, I'm telling you, that's my upset special of the week. Miami of Ohio will upset West Virginia. Here's my picks. Florida State and Nebraska win, but closer than the experts think. Virginia, Ohio State also win. And my not-so-fast special is, again, Purdue over Notre Dame.
Well, see, I think Notre Dame's going to win this football game against Purdue because of the ball control of their offense. Kevin Rogers does a great job of play calling, and I think they win the football game. Watch them to create turnovers and come up with some interceptions. Georgia Tech, love Joe Hamilton. I love this team, the direction they're going. Unfortunately, Florida State is the most powerful team in college football. I think the Noles will win big tonight. And I think Ohio State, they come back home after playing very little emotion, come back home, play an emotional football game, great defense, and I think they're going to show the ability to score from throwing the football down the field. I think they win big tonight.
So Miami wins in game day in Miami. Huh?
That's what I said.
That's not the Miami with the beach.
Yeah,
There's no beach there.
Oxford.
That's where they
I think it's a great Final Four. You got Indiana against North Carolina. UConn football against Kentucky. I want to go with Coach Knight and Coach Tubby today.
I like Indiana to beat
North
Carolina.
Yeah. Right. Virginia Clemson, any thoughts on that game?
I like Virginia.
Virginia. You like Virginia. Tommy Bowden to go 0-2 in the ACC.
Exactly right.
All right. We thank you for joining us. Stand by for some football here. Michigan in that game in the Big House, they have to avoid the letdown. It's a sandwich game for the Wolverines in between the big game with Notre Dame before they visit Syracuse and Rice. So they showed they had some problems last week. They had 5 fumbles. Now, for Penn State, well, you got 95,000 in Happy Valley, so 200,000 between those 2 games. So on ESPN2, it's Rice, Michigan. Pitt, Penn State coming up after this break on ESPN. Enjoy your day.
Preseason game? I hardly think so. Don't tell these two teams that anyway. Both schools gambled here. The fans win. Number 3 against number 4.
In a game that was supposed to set the tone for a season, Penn State sent a message.
He might go. Touchdown, Penn State. Draped all over him is LeVar Arrington.
The end result, a convincing statement that has propelled the Nittany Lions into the national spotlight once again. Today, nearly 100,000 Penn State faithful have gathered to watch their 2-0 team take the next step in realizing sweet dreams of the Sugar Bowl and a 3rd national championship. Awaiting the challenge in-state rival Pittsburgh, who would like nothing better than to halt Penn State's progress today. And in Happy Valley, 97,000 are here for the next-to-last scheduled meeting in the longest-running rivalry for both these schools, Pittsburgh and number 2, Penn State. Welcome to Beaver Stadium. Dave Barnett along with Bill Curry. Expectations were sky-high to begin this year, and if anything, they have been exceeded by the Lions with blowout wins over Arizona and Akron. A 2-quarterback system, and they're trying to prove that you can ride 2 quarterbacks all the way to a national title this year.
The 2-quarterback outbreak is reaching epidemic proportions, and even Joe Paterno is not immune this time. He's got Kevin Thompson and Richard Casey. Wade Phillips is quoted as having said that a 2-quarterback situation is usually created because neither one is good enough. Well, here at Penn State, just the opposite is the case. Kevin Thompson, the undisputed leader, elected captain by his offensive teammates. Richard Casey, the undisputed major league talent. I think these two will bring a major dose of themselves to this team for the team to function this year.
Now, by contrast, Walt Harris plays 2 for the Panthers because neither one has proven himself yet.
No, the one constant at Pittsburgh is that Walt Harris is a proven quarterback coach. Last week, John Turman came off the bench and got the job done against Bowling Green. David Priestley will be the backup today as Turman gets the start. But one of these guys has got to take the reins and take charge, and I think the best time would probably be about right now, David.
Panthers kept it close last year, 20-13 in Pittsburgh. They hope they can do so again. We have kickoff coming up from Happy Valley. Right now, we welcome Brian Kenny in the studio.
All right, Dave, thank you very much. Penn State and Pittsburgh, the 95th meeting. Brian Kenny here. I'll be back at the half of this game with Kirk and Lee. They'll join me then for the halftime report. Seeing a definite trend in college football, as mentioned just there, Penn State with 2 quarterbacks, Kevin Thompson, Richard Casey. 7 top 25 teams will be using 2 quarterbacks today as a plan. We'll be talking about Florida State and Georgia Tech a little later on, the ACC showdown. Georgia Tech's last win over the Seminoles, 1975. We'll be talking about that. That's an ABC game at 8 Eastern time. Meantime, this great rivalry. Joe Paterno has beaten Pittsburgh 8 straight times. Walt Harris would like to change that. We'll be back to the game after this.
It's in the game. ESPN's presentation of college football is brought to you by TGI Fridays. In here, it's always Friday.
Low 70s, low humidity. It's about as perfect as we could ask for in mid-September. Pittsburgh and Penn State are just about set to go. Let's welcome down on the sidelines Dave Ryan.
Dave, thanks a lot. Over the years, Penn State certainly has been known as a team with a devastating defense and a strong offensive running game, but rarely an offense with explosive potential like they've had this year. Now, a year ago, the team had 45 big plays, 20 or more yards. That's not bad for an offense, averaging about 256 yards per game. But this year, the numbers are absolutely through the roof. 19 big plays already and more touchdowns in that category than they had in all of last year with just 2 games played. Plus, quick strike drives. That's been a category so far the team has done very well with. Already this year, less than a minute 45 average on the scoring drive so far this year. Now, guys, a moment ago I talked with Walt Harris, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers. His assistants, they say RAC, run after catch, is a key category they're going to try to shut down because Penn State has been so explosive, guys.
And Dave, they're sharing the wealth. Penn State has had touchdowns from 12 different players in these first 2 victories. Halftime at Beaver Stadium, 10-7. Let's go to Brian Kenny in the studio.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Brian Kenny, Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit. Oh, surprise so far. Impressive for Pitt in this game.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with Walt Harris, the Pitt head coach. His offensive game plan. He's throwing the ball around nicely, keeping Penn State's defense off the balance. But I cannot believe he took on quarterback John Turman out of the ballgame. Why? Didn't you want to win the game?
You saw Priestley throwing the rock.
He's throwing the ball
around a little bit. That's all.
Get that other kid in the game.
Give him a chance. You got to look at Larry Coyer and the job he's done with his Pittsburgh defense. Penn State coming into this football game the last 2 weeks, fantastic. They've shown the ability to run and throw, and so far in this first half, look a little bit confused. I don't know if it's their offense. You got to give a little bit of credit to Pitt's defense.
Oh, yeah, and also LeVar Arrington, little Bush League tactics there. We'll check in on the second half and see if he can punish the punter a little more. It looks like he's got him outweighed. It's the Holiday Inn halftime report. We're coming back. We're going to be checking in with the rushing leader, going after the Big Ten mark and the NCAA mark, Ron Dane, Wisconsin. We're back right after this. And welcome back to Holiday Inn halftime report. Brian Kenny, Lee Corso, Kirk Herbstreit. Talk about Michigan a little bit here. Michigan and Rice, of course, Wolverines coming off the 26-22 win over Notre Dame. 2 quarterbacks for this team as well. Again, 7 teams in the top 25 have 2 quarterbacks by plan, and Michigan doing that again here, though, catching a break. Wolverines, Diallo Johnson, ball comes loose. Rice picking up the ball, but it's ruled Michigan ball, and then Drew Henson is in there. In for the touchdown on the first series. Michigan up 10-zip. Tom Brady, by the way, 7 for 9, 89 yards in the first quarter before Henson took over. Later, Henson again, second quarter, gets it to David Terrell, 15 yards. That's for a touchdown. Michigan up on top. Right now, it's 20-0. They got less than a minute to go in the first half. Michigan 24-3 at home under Lloyd Carr. Ball State and Wisconsin. Ron Dane moving past Ed Marinaro of Cornell and Hill Street Blues fame for 13th on the all-time rushing list. He's going up 12 yards there. Led to a field goal. It's 3-zip. Eric Malik, nose tackle, bouncing through and eating them up. Got that. Wisconsin defense stuffing the run, and Wisconsin leads 5-0 with that safety. After the punt, after the safety, Nick Davis going back. Nick Davis had a return for a touchdown last week, 3rd in the nation in punt return yardage last year. As a freshman, he's going all the way in for the touchdown. Wisconsin leading Ball State. They're at the half, 22-7. Ron Dane, 20 carries, 98 yards in that first half. We've seen that before. Happens a lot with Ron Dane. Meantime, Lee, more than Ron Dane, clearly, in this one as well.
Well, Brian, one of the things I was impressed with Wisconsin, you know, Wisconsin's big and usually real slow on defense, but I think they're a lot quicker. But I will not evaluate them till the big blue come in there a couple of weeks.
To the
Michigan comes in
get the
there.
exhibition season over with and then start the season, then we'll evaluate them. I agree with you. I think they look quicker on defense, especially in the trenches. But Ron Dane's going to look back at this season, and if he doesn't get the record, he has nobody to blame but his teammates. Not because they're not helping, but because they're doing so much in special teams, defense. Every time Wisconsin has the football, they're starting at the opposite or the other team's 15 or 20-yard line. They have no room to pick up any yards.
We were talking regular season starts.
Yeah.
So, and we were talking about this too. So every time Nick Davis runs one back, Ron Dane loses yards. But you know what?
Safeties, yeah, special teams.
What's he supposed to do? Meantime, let's check in other Big Ten teams in action. TCU, of course, off a close loss, got edged by ASU, now tied up with Northwestern, 7-7 right now. Randy Walker looking for his first win at Northwestern. Meantime, Eastern Michigan and Michigan State, it's 7-zip. Michigan State up on top. Beat Oregon in the season opener 27-20. That was Michigan State. Meantime, we're coming back up. We're going to be talking about the ACC showdown, Georgia Tech, Florida State. That's the big one. Talk about that when we come back. And welcome back to Holiday Inn Halftime Report. Before we get back out to the game, we'll be talking about this one, Georgia Tech and Florida State. You can see it on ABC this evening. Now, Georgia Tech usually hangs tough. Back in '96, it was 3-0 after the first quarter. They lost to Florida State 49-3. It was 7-0 at the half 2 years ago. It was 38-0 the final. And last year, it was 7-7 at the half. Florida State won that one 34-7. So you got Georgia Tech and Florida State. Dan Kendra, at one time one of the best high school quarterbacks in the nation, probably the best, gets to start at fullback, so you're going to see a little different running game.
Forget about it. He will not touch the football at fullback. The key guy for Florida State is going to be this young running back, Nick Maddox. I've been talking about him for a week, and I'm telling you again, this kid is a running guy that can really run the ball. He's Mr. All-World from North Carolina. Be careful on one thing. Florida State's going to add some running game to him, and with their passing game, they're going to be dynamite.
What are you dissing our man here? It's the first time we worked with him. You already forget about it. I'll give you a forget about. Forget about Nick Maddox. You got to worry about Florida State. Their 4 wide receiver look. They're going to try to attack Georgia Tech with a man coverage. They're going to put them in 4 receivers, force Georgia Tech to either play man or sit back in zone. And if they play man, Lavernius Coles, Peter Warrick, Ron Dugans. If they sit back in zone, not Nick Maddox yet, it will be Travis Minor, but Florida State will win big tonight at home at Tallahassee.
Yeah, meantime, Chris Fowler's sitting right over there. He's going to be back after. Now I know what he goes through in this scenario. At any rate, UCLA and Ohio State talk about that. Of course, game 2 of the 2-game suspension for the disabled parking 11 for UCLA. But Danny Farmer, the All-American flanker, is back for UCLA in this one. Let's get more on this game from Lynn Swan.
If I could give the college football season a name to equate with the Chinese New Year, I'd call this the year of the 2-headed quarterback. Everybody has 2, and UCLA is no different. They have Drew Bennett and Corey Paz. They're young and inexperienced, but what they do have is a very talented group of wide receivers. Most people around the country think it could be the best in the country. And even if Danny Farmer is not available to them, look for them to give the receivers a chance to go up for the ball. That means that the Ohio State defense has to put pressure on those 2 young quarterbacks. Number 32, Niall Diggs, is the man. He's aggressive. He's got excellent speed. He could end up with 3 or 4 sacks in this ball game. In the secondary for Ohio State, Ahmad Plummer and Gary Berry are the people who are going to be under the most pressure because they're going to be covering wide receivers one-on-one all over the football field. And as I said, look for a lot of jump balls so that the UCLA receivers are trying to take advantage of their height. Now, Ohio State also has 2 quarterbacks. But for my money, the key is the UCLA offense versus the Ohio State defense. And so keep an eye on how those units perform. Now, let's go back to the studio.
All right, Lynn, thank you very much. By the way, first meeting between these two schools since 1980. You figure they meet at some point, maybe in the Rose Bowl, but it really hasn't happened. See anything different here with Ohio State from what they did last time around against Miami?
Well, they're going to play with more emotion. Coming home, playing at night, the crowd will help inspire them to play with a lot of emotion. I think the key to the football game will be defensive pressure. Cortland Bullard comes back. He missed the first game against Miami. He's their emotional leader. He and Niall Diggs will put a lot of pressure on the UCLA inexperienced offensive line and quarterbacks. They're going to have to because the Bruins have as much talent at the wide receiver and running back positions as any team the Buckeyes will face. I think Ohio State will win tonight.
We saw them in person, UCLA, right?
Yeah.
They got no butts, right?
No,
Ohio State's big butts, boom, smash them in the mouth, run right over them. Ohio State wins this one with their offensive line running at UCLA.
But all those big butts can't block 9 defensive linemen. They're going to have to throw it. They're going to have to throw the football.
Forget about it. Run right at them.
Those butts are big, but they're not that big. We'll see.
Breaking it down to body parts here. By the way, tonight, the big games are coming up. You can see them on ABC. You got Georgia Tech, Florida State, the ACC showdown early on as well. Also, you got UCLA and Ohio State, depending on where you live. It's on ABC. 8 Eastern time this evening. At 3:30 Eastern, some interesting games here. You got Cal and Nebraska, Virginia and Clemson, or Notre Dame and Purdue. Notre Dame leads that all-time series 46-22 with 2 ties. Meantime, though, things have changed when Joe Tiller has taken over in this game. Last year, Drew Brees, 24 for 36, had 45 yards rushing as well. So you got a pretty good ball game here where Purdue is now the favorite. Joe Tiller has taken over. Things have changed.
Excellent point. I knocked you on 1 point, but this was a good point. Joe Tiller, 1 win. Robbed last year. Joe Tiller and Purdue will not be intimidated by the gold helmets of Notre Dame. Drew Brees takes the first step towards New York and the Heisman today. Drew Brees bombs them, throws the ball all over, and beats the Irish.
They cannot win this football game by just throwing it. I know last year they had a lot of success. Purdue's going to have to run the football for them to be able to win. I look at the other side of the ball. Notre Dame is a team that has had some good times in their first 2 games. Jarius Jackson has made some miscues with this new offense. But for them to win, ball control. They've got to control the line of scrimmage. The offensive line for the Irish have to play much better, but I think they'll get this game done. They're going to play with a lot of intensity. It's a tough week for them after following that Michigan game, but I think the Irish will win it.
It's going to be a Shillelagh Trophy they're playing for that one. In the meantime, we take a break here right now. We'll be back on the Holiday Inn halftime report. We'll get back to Penn State. Yeah, Rashard Casey early on, he's throwing the football, but having a tough time with Pittsburgh. We'll be back right after this. Back here on the Holiday Inn halftime report. Let's start things off. Take a look at Houston and Alabama. Alabama's never lost to Houston. 8-0 against that college. Big time. Andrews out. Going to Sean Alexander. Failed him out against Vanderbilt last week. Alexander's in for 25 yards, 7-zip. Crimson Tide. More Sean Alexander later on. This in the second quarter. Going 17 yards, cutting back in. Sean Alexander in for the touchdown, and Alabama up on top of Houston. It's 17-3, 4 and change left in that game for Alabama. 2 linebackers suspended and struggled again against Vanderbilt. Fortunate to get that win. Miami of Ohio against West Virginia after roughing the kicker call against the Mountaineers. Sets this up. First quarter, Miami of Ohio trailing by 3. Mike Bass, Slide Johnson, 56 yards for the touchdown here. Miami of Ohio going up on top. At the time, right now, West Virginia's up at half, 19-14. 8-game winning streak for Miami of Ohio in 13 of their last 14 games. Travis Prentice, by the way, no touchdowns right now, chasing the all-time record. C.J. Leak has not played as of yet for Wake Forest. Wake Forest taking on Army, the opener at West Point. 10-9 right now. Wake Forest lost 7 of its last 8 games. Games coming up on ESPN2 this evening. South Carolina and Georgia. Lou Holtz takes on one of the big 3 in the SEC East. That's 5 Eastern time. Then 8 Eastern time, it is Texas off the annihilation of Stanford. Major Applewhite and Chris Sims, the freshman, back in New Jersey to face Rutgers. Coming back, we're going to take a look. Again, it's Penn State and Pitt. John Turman making things happen, and Pittsburgh staying tough in this long-standing rivalry. And back here on the Holiday Inn halftime report, as we wrap things up, I'm going to start with Kirk here, as I've learned. What are you looking for in the second half here? Penn State probably could be the best team in the country and struggling in this game.
Well, after week 1, we were in Happy Valley, and people were ready to just, that's it, forget the rest of the season. This is the best team given the national championship. It's a long way to go, and they're going to look a lot better here in the second half. You got to remember, they play the Miami Hurricanes next week down in Miami. They need a good second half to have a lot of confidence when they go down there to take on the Canes, because the Canes are waiting for their chance to play them.
I'm looking for LeVar Arrington, 6'3", 245, to beat up a cheerleader next at 6 feet, 185. That's cheap shot, and let me tell you something. That cheap shot fired up the Pitt team. From that moment on, Pitt was a much better football team trying to retaliate it. That was a cheap shot, should not be allowed.
Oh, and sure, we had a good replay earlier on the first time around holding the guy down. Bush League stuff from LeVar Arrington doesn't help his, Heisman chances, if you want to look at it that way.
Chance.
No.
Hurts the image.
Forget about it.
That'll do it for the halftime report. Enjoy the second half, everybody. Bye-bye.
Penn State wins it 20-17, and from Happy Valley to Chris Fowler.
Well, the folks in Happy Valley can take a deep breath. And the showdown is on at Miami next week. Realize this would have been the second biggest upset of the 90s, behind only Temple's win against Virginia Tech last year. That's what a big favorite Penn State was in this game. Dave talked about it. What a sequence for LeVar Arrington today. Roughs up the punter. You call for him to beat up a cheerleader. Almost gets kicked out of the game. I called for it, makes a big defensive play. Then the ball goes through his hands. He could have been the GOAT, comes up with the field goal block at the end. Wow.
This is why we love college football. Everyone assumes that something is definitely going to happen, and next thing you know, the unexpected happens. Give Pittsburgh and their head coach, Walt Harris, a lot of credit for coming into this game thinking that they had a chance to win this football game. Great plan on both sides, but Penn State came through when they had to. You know, they had a tough time establishing the line of scrimmage and trying to run the football. Plus, the pass protection was terrible. They better get better before next week.
Penn State won the football game, but Pittsburgh found themselves a football team. And I think Walt Harris's team now will move forward in that league in the Big East. I'm going to tell you, there are no pushovers anymore for them anyhow in the Big East. They're a pretty good football team. A solid team, as Joe Paterno said.
You hit on a very big problems with the Penn State offensive line there. There's a quarterback issue because neither guy really played well. Thompson, some bad decisions, but then he makes the big throw at the end that sets up the field goal. Back now to Happy Valley. Dave Ryan with Mr. Arrington. Dave?
All right, Chris Fowler, thanks so much. LeVar, first question. What do you have against punters? That was quite a battle you had going over the Pittsburgh kicker.
Well, that's my job. That's what we've been planning on doing all week, and I'm just trying to carry out my assignment.
You had a big block kick at the end of the game, obviously. You had a chance to intercept the ball, too, a couple times down the stretch. How big a test was this for you? Did you pass it?
Well, I think Pitt always comes to play us tough, and for us to get out with the win, that's all I'm worried about. I'm just happy. I made a couple mistakes, so I got to get better, but I did well.
LeVar, does this make your team a lot better to be tested like this today?
I think so. I think it was good for us.
Congratulations. Thank you. Chris Fowler, let's go back to you.
Well, they were talking about the Sugar Bowl in Happy Valley 15 minutes into the season. 1 quarter into the season. I think there's some folks that, yeah, shake it up a little bit maybe by this game.
Maybe LeVar Arrington could be right. It's one of these football games where they look back at it and think, hey, you know, we were lucky to get out of there with a win. We learned from it. Let's gather the troops, get ready to go down to Miami, because the Miami Hurricanes had an off week. They've been waiting and pointing to this game for a long time, and this will be a tough game for them after this.
If the pollsters are fair, and we talk about Paterno moving up, they had to drop down. That performance against Pittsburgh was not good enough for the #2 team in the nation.
You could have a point. Tennessee in an off week could move up. We got to see Florida State tonight against Georgia Tech.
Oh, baloney. They should have been better than that.
Win the games.
I love this show. Meanwhile, Michigan in the Big House taking on a Rice team that may suddenly have some problems. Rice was smacked around by Houston in the opening game. Michigan, you know, this is a classic sandwich game here. Michigan coming off the Notre Dame game, looking ahead perhaps to that Syracuse game. Instead, a very solid performance of everything except the turf there. The Stog squad, they continue to have problems with the Big House with the turf right there. Here's Drew Henson, already a 13-0 game. Whoa, what an armor. Zipped it to David Terrell, the future all-world guy. Wolverine special teams getting it done, 27-0. Marquise Walker comes through, blocks the punt, and then his teammate knocks him out of bounds. They ruined what would have been a touchdown, but they would cash in on the next play. Brady comes back into the A train, and he knocked it in the end zone right there. Michigan makes it 34-0. Mini-Me. He's a Michigan man, isn't he? Mini-Me from, of course, the Austin Powers movie. Watching 37-3. Rice would get on the board late, but the Wolverines looking real real strong heading into that Syracuse game, Lee.
First thing I noticed right there, Michigan is good enough offensively and defensively. They can challenge Penn State for the Big Ten title, even if the game's played at Happy Valley. I like them. Kicking game, offense, defense, two quarterback. Michigan's a very good football team.
I agree. We said this last week after we saw them. This is a typical Michigan football team. Fundamentally sound on one side of the football, the defense, which they always have. And then with the offense, they're starting to get a little bit more balanced. The quarterback situation will take care of itself. But I love David Terrell, Marquise Walker, some wide receivers to give them great balance, and they're going to continue to get better. This is going to be a great Michigan team by the time they match up with Penn State.
And again, no real quarterback problem because they're winning big and both quarterbacks are playing well. Meanwhile, Wisconsin, we talked about them. They're in that collision course with Michigan in a couple of weeks. Today, Ball State, number 97 against the run last year. You knew what that would mean. Alvarez still on the crutches here, but the big guys up front are still healthy. Eric Malik burns the double team on the little twist there. Tate trapped for a safety. It's 5-0 Badgers at Camp Randall. Ensuing punt after the safety. Nick Davis is a big playmaker. We don't talk enough about him in the Dane shadow.
We always talk about Ron Dane, but Nick Davis this year, he's moved out to wide receiver. He's always been known for returning punts. He has a big one here today.
And the Wisconsin defense, you guys talked about it at halftime. Quicker. Here's big Chris Godarzi on the carom. Big guy rumbling in the end zone. Now, he's not necessarily the quickest guy in the world, but they have plenty of quicks on the defense here. And then Dane, finally, we show a Dane highlight, 18-yard play here. You guys mentioned the special teams just blowing up the fourth corner there. Special teams and the defense making a lot of plays. So Dane had exactly a $158, and that's exactly what he needed to average per game coming in. So with 9 games to go, he needs 14.24. Previous 9 games, you can see the average is about 132 yards. So Wisconsin continues to impress in all phases. Ron Dane, again, kind of a light day in a big game.
It's very difficult, as it was last year, to get a real good feel for this Wisconsin team. Clearly, if you look at them last year, they ended up the year strong against UCLA. Look at them this year. You're seeing a few more athletes at the skill positions. Nick Davis is getting involved. A young man named Evans, who's out at wide receiver. Of course, Ron Dane. The quarterbacks look active. This is a good Wisconsin team, but yet wait till 2 weeks when Michigan comes up to Camp Randall. Then we'll be able to evaluate it.